first we turn to Julian Assange. A judge in the UK today refused to cancel an arrest warrant for the WikiLeaks founder, ruling that he could still be arrested by UK police if he leaves the Ecuadorian embassy in London. We're talking to Randy Credico. He joins us from New York. He's an activist, a comedian, and the former director of the William Moses Kunstler Fund for Racial Justice. Randy, welcome back.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you, John, and thank you, Brian, for having me on this show. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, the pleasure's ours. Can you give us an update? This was actually kind of a surprise, at least it was for me, and I was further surprised by the toughness of some of the statements that the judge made.
Well, it was a surprise because, I was communicating with Mr. Assange yesterday. He was pretty optimistic. I spoke to his mother last night at length, and she was cautiously optimistic in Australia. And, last week when it was postponed a week, this ultimate decision, last week she said no, and then they came back and said, all right, in the interest of justice, how does it serve the interest of justice by keeping him in this place now for 6 years, and with the weekend revelations, which I knew about, the back and forth between the Crown Prosecutor Services and the Swedish prosecutor, in which they wanted to drop the case in 2013, and the CPS said, no, don't do that. Please don't get cold. They said, don't get cold feet. She said, there's nothing there. This is Marianne Nye. And so what they did was they kept him there an extra 5 years based on this European arrest warrant that she didn't even want to pursue. It was at the behest of the Crown Prosecutor Services, which, of course, has been under attack the last couple of weeks for their unethical behavior. In many cases, Lori Love, and not turning over evidence in 900 cases. So we thought, a lot of us thought, because of the momentum, the revelation, the Guardian finally said, all right, it's time to get on Julian's side. And we thought this would have some influence on the judge. But the judge not only did not say in the interest of justice he should be let free, she went further. She was nasty. She said that he's responsible for what happened, when in fact it was the Crown Prosecutor Services which was responsible. But as Roy Cohn said, forget about the facts. Just tell me who the judge is. So, I've done some research on this judge, Judge Arbuthnot. Her husband, now dig this, her husband is a conservative member of Parliament on the Defense Intel Committee, Baron Arbuthnot.
There it is right there.
All right, and so we know how much influence BAE, how much influence BP has over the British entire system there. They are the rulers there and other defense contractors. So it was surprising. It was disappointing. It was disconcerting. But I think that we will continue on. The fight continues to try to get Julian free. But I must say that this was a horrible decision, and it was shocking to a lot of his supporters. And I feel bad for his mother in particular, because she hasn't seen him in 6 years. His kids haven't seen him in years. And so what they've done is at the behest of the U.S. We know this is something that has to do with the U.S. The same way back in 2003 when Tony Blair and Jack Straw went along with the fudged, phony evidence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and they collaborated on that lie. Well, that continues today. They are collaborating with the U.S. and keeping this truth teller out. They don't want him to get out there and continue exposing the crimes that are committed in our name.
Randy Credico is our guest. You're listening to Loud and Clear. I'm Brian Becker, and I'm joined in studio by co-host John Kiriakou. We're talking about the judge's decision today to uphold the warrant on Julian Assange. Julian Assange has been at the Ecuadorian embassy for more than 5 years. Randy Credico, the United Nations investigated the case of Julian Assange, and this was an important ruling. And as a matter of fact, the ruling by the UN committee determined that Julian Assange was the victim of arbitrary detention. That's a legal term at the United Nations. In each and every other instance, as far as I'm aware, when the UN has intervened and said someone is the victim of arbitrary detention, the order is to release that person from detention. And as a consequence, we have a situation where the entire world, as embodied in the UN resolution or the UN determination about Julian Assange, stands on one side, and then you have the British courts and the British government and the British police functioning, it would seem to me, as the junior partner, little brother, extension of the power of the Washington, D.C. establishment, who is still, trembling because WikiLeaks and Julian Assange dared to reveal some of the secrets about the U.S. government workings in the Middle East and elsewhere. And some of that evidence demonstrates clearly that the U.S. government and its policymakers were involved in criminal conduct. That's the sort of constellation of forces. That's where the battle lines are drawn right now. That's what's going on, right?
Yes, absolutely. This is definitely the orders are coming from D.C. We broke away from Britain in 1776, and now they are now in our hands. They do what we tell them to do. I hate to hammer dogs, but they are our lapdog, particularly when it comes to the criminal justice system right now. So they gave him his day in court, but as Bill Kunstler said, there's no justice in and out of court. As we know in this country, you get your day in court. The Haymarket defendants, the Sacco and Vanzetti, going back to Socrates. You give them a day in court, it looks legal, and everyone's satisfied. Well, they had a very rigged system happening, and he's the victim of it, and definitely the shots are being called here in D.C., and that is what happened to Julian Assange, the war machine, and their lackeys and government and the IC and the Defense Department. They're the ones that don't want Julian Assange to be out there and telling the truth about what is going on. No, the same. Now, I don't want to. There are a lot of differences, but remember when Manuel Noriega was captured in 1989, they kept him inside of a cathedral. They had him holed up there. Then they brought him out, and then he disappeared, basically. He had a trial, and then he was shuffled around between the U.S. and France until he died and was never able to say what he knew. Now, Julian, he wasn't a journalist, but certainly they did not want him to say what he knew. Julian Assange is exposing these kinds of crimes and the ongoing crimes that are ordered out of Washington, D.C., whether it be mass surveillance by the CIA along with the NSA, the wars in Iraq, CIA torture, the entire gamut. And they don't want him to do that. They want to send a message. This is a very chilling situation. And the big problem is that mainstream journalism, who will be next, are standing on the sidelines. The Guardian has finally come out from the rain, and they are on the side of Julian Assange. You have been for a long time, to your credit, and a few others in this country, but it's time to step up and support Julian Assange to protect your own business, which is journalism.
Randy, you mentioned at the start of our conversation Lori Love. Lori Love will not be extradited to the United States. The judge in that case ruled that an extradition would be illegal because Lori Love suffers from depression, and the United Nations has deemed American prisons to be a form of torture. There was a Muslim 3 or 4 years ago from the UK who argued the same thing and also won his case against extradition. We know that Julian is suffering from depression. We know that his health has not been good. Could this not be a good grounds for appeal and perhaps a court order coming from the UK that would prohibit the United States from seeking his extradition? We've got 60 seconds.
Okay, yes, I think that is one. And Brian hit on the nail on the head with the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention. That, too, should be a reason why he should be let go. They're going to continue. They have 3 months to appeal today's decision, and then they have a appeal, or they are going before the International Court in The Hague to argue based on the UN's decision that he is being arbitrarily detained and he deserves to be free and compensated. Based on that, they are going before that court. We'll see how real that court really is in The Hague, because everyone now realizes what is happening, and the U.S. is pulling the strings, and all we can do is continue getting the information. And I thank Sputnik and I thank your show, Loud and Clear, for getting the message out there.
We're happy to do it. This is a fight that is nowhere near over. Unfortunately, we are out of time, though. We're joined from New York by Randy Credico. Randy is an activist, a comedian, and the former director of the William Moses Kunstler Fund for Racial Justice. Stay tuned to Loud and Clear. We'll be right back after this.